Hello, everybody, and a warm welcome to another episode of Tapas Project Shala. I'm Preeti Vikram, founder of Tapas School. It gives me great pleasure to host Tapas Project Shala because this is the second annual edition of bringing project based learning to every household in India, making parents and educators more aware about project based learning and all the different alternatives available to learning to every household, like I said. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome our speaker for today. I'm really excited to be talking to Dr. Gina Olabuanaga. She is a professional learning designer and facilitator for K 12 educators. Her areas of expertise include project based learning, social and emotional learning, and other constructivist practices. Her professional life has been an extension of her doctoral study on effective professional learning. As the former director of curriculum at PBL Works, she led and supported the design and facilitation of workshops and services. Along with her partners at ACP, she has written three books: Connecting Together, which is collaboration strategies for online and physically distanced learning, SEL Connected, which is accessible strategies to bridge social and emotional learning to everyday content, and the latest, HQPBL Connected, which is an educator's guide to creating meaningful project based student experiences. You can find Gina on Twitter at Ola Dr. Gina or at www.appliedcoaching.org. And it gives me great pleasure to bring her onto the screen. Please join me in welcoming Gina. A very, very good evening, Gina.
Thank you so much for having me, Annette, and thank you for that lovely introduction.
It's a pleasure because I think you bring a very unique perspective of social emotional learning to our entire conference, and that's very, very refreshing. So I'm really excited for the questions and the conversations that we are going to have today.
Yes, me as well.
So I think we should begin with the most basic question, which is, what does constructivism in classroom look like, and how is it different from what we conventionally see happening in schools?
Yes. All right, well, let's start with a basic definition. So constructivism is learners building or constructing knowledge rather than passively receiving it. So what do I mean by that? So in a traditional teaching and learning model, the teacher is at the center. You may have heard the expression sage on the stage. This refers to the teacher being the primary keeper of the knowledge. They hold the wisdom that they then share and impart with young people. The teacher often directs the learning decisions, the pathways for young people. In a constructivist approach over here, the student is at the center. So what that means is the learner is actively making meaning of a problem, of a challenge, of concepts, and they are making decisions about their learning. They are asking deep questions, and it allows the learning to stick, to have more context and meaning because the students are the ones making the decisions, asking the questions, driving the learning. And this doesn't mean that there isn't a place anymore for the teacher to be the keeper of wisdom. It just shifts to students leading the charge, and where a model that ends up looking more like a learning partnership, where the teacher is a facilitator of learning, supporting young people, mentoring them, guiding them in how to learn deeply, learn effectively, solve problems and challenges for themselves and in collaboration with their peers and others outside of the classroom. Now, there are a few examples that I'd like to highlight of constructivist practice. So one is project-based learning, and that refers to the process of students working to solve a challenge, answer a question, build some product or experience. They make decisions about their learning. They are then learning content that they need to know in order to complete the project, as opposed to learn content, and then at the end, they put something together to show that they understand the concepts. So the learning actually happens through the development of the project. Another example of constructivist practice is something called Socratic seminar. So what Socratic seminar is it is a discussion process or protocol where young people come together. There's some question that they are exploring and trying to reach understanding, sometimes consensus on. These can be a little informal sometimes, where students are sharing their wisdom, but often there is a component of young people having to come with evidence to explain their reasoning and their rationale for why they think or believe what they do in response to the question or prompt. And then another is mind mapping. So this is the process of young people showing in some kind of visual way how they understand the concepts and make meaning. Sometimes this can be done through graphic organizers, and at other times the student can construct a model that articulates how they understand the interrelatedness of a set of concepts.
So that's fantastic. And I think you've given 3 examples, and I think there are quite a lot of examples of how
Yes.
constructivism looks like. And I think for the viewers also, it's very clear that this doesn't look like a conventional school that maybe I and a lot of people like me have gone to school. We've
Yes.
always had what you mentioned, the sage on stage approach. So this is quite different and quite interesting. At Tapas, we are really lucky to be following project-based learning. So we will have some more conversations on that. Today, I'd like to ask you, because you have done so much research and so much work on social emotional learning, do you think that it can be implemented in any school at any time in an existing academic curriculum, or do you think we need to completely relook how it is done in schools, from curriculum layouts to pedagogies, to be able to integrate SEL in classrooms? I mean, what do we need to do?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And really, it's a yes and. So let me jump here for a moment to this. So here's the yes and. Yes, social and emotional learning can be implemented in any curriculum, but what you need is a framework. You need to have a clear set of skills and capacities that you are trying to help young people cultivate and develop. So there are a number of frameworks that exist in the world. I like to use CASEL's framework. They're a US-based organization. They have this lovely SEL framework, of which there are 5 domains. And it's a little tiny on my screen. So it's self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. So we will be sharing a link to the CASEL framework, so you'll be able to take a look and learn more. They have a lovely guide that breaks down the different individual skills that come under these capacities. What is also really lovely about this framework is that they are clear that the social and emotional skills are not limited to like within one student or within one classroom, but rather like a robust social and emotional learning program actually has these like concentric circles of support. So you have the individual student, you have the classroom, you have the school, you have parents and caretakers, and then you have the community, which they are also an important part of successful SEL teaching and learning in a school context. So if you are in a position to reimagine your curriculum, sure, you should do that. That is awesome. And if you're not, there are ways to implement it in the everyday classroom. So to that end, me along with my colleagues did write a book on this a couple of years ago on SEL Connected. So what we offer in this book are examples based on the 5 domains for CASEL on how you could take a traditional lesson and you could do it with an eye and a lens and an intentionality towards social and emotional learning. So I offer a couple of examples here just to give you a sense of like what that might look like. And we offer examples across the K-12 span and across disciplines. So no matter where you are, you can see some examples. So as promised, one of the CASEL domains is self-management. And under self-management, it talks about stress management. So one example we provide is a lesson for how to do this in math. Young people often feel anxiety around math. You know, the newness of it, the discomfort with not being able to get the answer right away, some of the stereotypes that exist around math. And so the lesson calls on young people to notice the feelings that they're having in their body and how that is affecting their ability to practice the skill, learn the content, and how the teacher can then use that as a way to elevate, like, hey, so notice what's going on in your body right now. What are some strategies that we can use to manage our stress in this moment as we're working through a difficult challenge? They go and they practice, and then they come back together at the end. And how did that work? Were you able to reduce your stress? How do you feel now? What do you think you'll do in the future when you encounter another challenge? So this could be a secondary, school teacher doing stress management and math with young people. Another example is self-awareness. So another domain is self-awareness, and a music teacher might use self-awareness as a way to connect art to expression, right? So talking about what are the different emotions that you have, how do those show up in your body, how do they feel, what kinds of musical compositions reflect those different emotions, how can you tell the story of your story, how you feel through a musical piece. So there's another way that we're teaching young people about their emotions and their understanding of others, and how they can use the discipline, in this case music. And the yes and is, so yes, you can incorporate SEL into your everyday classroom, and we advocate that there's a process for doing that. So if you're also going to reimagine your curriculum, this might be a way that you bring intentionality to the lesson structure so that you can introduce social and emotional learning skills, practice them, and then reflect at the end. So this is our SEL Connected Lesson Booster. This will also be available to you as part of this session. So the first thing an educator will want to do is to name the skill that you are going to be practicing. So let's say it's self-management. And so you talk about what that is, you elevate, say, we're going to work on this. And then the next thing you do is you move into norming it. So this is the process of coming together collaboratively with young people and providing guidance and support where necessary on what that skill looks like. What does stress management feel like? What does it look like? What does it sound like as you are engaging in the work? And you'll want to also do the work of starting to contextualize it, so your young people know what that looks like in math versus what that looks like in physical education versus what that looks like when reading literature. The next piece is to put it into practice. We call this ACT. So you have named the social and emotional learning skill. Now you have normed around it. The students understand what it is. You started to contextualize it into their discipline, and now they're going to go implement it in the lesson. So as I elevated with the math example, they will go and do their math lesson. They will be mindful and intentional as they're doing their work. How am I feeling? How am I managing? What does that look like? And then at the end of the lesson, we have to close the loop. This is an important way to concretize learning, which is to reflect. So individually, and then in some kind of small group or larger group discussion, have young people reflect on how did I do? What did I practice? How did that feel? What goals do I want to set for myself in the future? Often teachers will facilitate a whole group debrief, some kind of quick checkout, so the teacher has a sense of like where young people are. And then we recommit to doing that skill again in the future. So it's not a one and done, but this is the process by which skills would be named and skills would be practiced over time. So, yeah.
That's brilliant. I think very often we just assume that SEL is happening in the classroom. Very often we just think that, children are getting these skills. So having this kind of a framework, understanding that there has to be a conscious effort made to ensure that SEL is happening is important. And I think I love the way that you've really simplified it in just 4 steps. I mean, it's just name it, norm it, act, and reflect. So that's really easy for us to follow, and it doesn't put a burden on the facilitator. It makes it, it's not one more thing that they have to really keep in mind, because already every facilitator, teacher in the classroom is burdened with quite a lot of things that they have to achieve. So this is
Yeah.
really great. Thank you for this.
Yay. And actually,
So
if it's okay, if it's okay, may I add one more thing that I just thought of as you were reflecting?
yes, please.
Yeah, so when we're thinking about the ACT segment where young people are practicing using the skill in the context of the lesson, it's important for the teacher to be circulating around the room so they can provide direction, redirection as needed, but they can also be listening for bright spots where a young person or a group is really doing a great job with the skill. And they can share with the whole class at just-in-time celebration. So, hey, I'm noticing so-and-so is doing this in this way. That is an excellent example of what we want to be doing, or they could provide a redirection where if students are maybe forgetting to practice the skill, I want to gently remind you when we looked at our norms, this is what the skill looks like. Check in with yourself. Are you practicing it? Have you had the opportunity to do that yet? If not, be thinking about ways that you could practice before we come to the reflection at the end of the lesson. So again, just want to give teachers that pro tip, because if you just send young people off to their devices, their own devices, they might not know what to do or they might get lost along the way.
Yeah, and I think these touch points that the teacher has constantly also helps reiterate what we've begun. And I think that gentle nudge towards, okay, this is the right direction. I think that's really important. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
So
yeah, you
that
bet.
really brings me to the next question, that um, if we are doing SEL in such a planned, organized manner, is it important to assess where the like you say, young people are in this entire spectrum of SEL, or is it important to assess? And if it is, then how do we assess? What do we do in order to know where our young people are in this process?
Yes. So before I explain this little four quadrant grid here, I want to invite us to think about assessment as feedback. Um, so assessment is an opportunity to check in with where we are and to provide guidance to the young person about where they are. Um, if you start talking about grading, people can have some really different feelings about well, what does it mean to grade social and emotional learning? If we think of it as this is our feedback moment, it shifts the relationship to it, and it makes it more palatable to receive that feedback. So that was my first invitation. So when we're talking about tools for assessment, you have to start by having a framework. So like Castle, but there are other frameworks that one might be able to use. The next thing is to leverage self-assessment. So engage students in rating themselves, rubrics or some kind of agreed upon indicators, even if it's in the States, we call them anchor charts, where the young people would do that norming activity, let's say at the beginning, and they would write what the social and emotional learning skill looks like, feels like, sounds like. Even those could be indicators against which young people are rating themselves. Like, was it on a 1 to 5? How well did I implement or practice this particular skill? So self-assessment is really important. We're trying to empower young people to know who they are, how they're learning, what they need, and having the rubrics or those indicators, that shared language, is going to be really important. The second piece is reflection, which has a relationship to self-assessment, but it's different. It's also different. So allowing students the opportunity to stop and really think about what am I learning? How am I learning it? How does it feel to learn? And it not just being about academic content, but it's what am I learning about myself? What am I learning about others? How I interact with others, as well as how I'm feeling about the content and skills that I'm practicing within the academic setting. And then teachers and parents, as well, and caregivers as well, you have this powerful tool of observation where you leverage those powers to observe your young people. Once you start to have language for social and emotional learning skills, you can start to identify different skills or things that you will want to see in your young people. You can observe them for that, and then start to use that to gauge readiness, to provide feedback, support, or modeling that you might need to offer. All right, and then so the next piece that I invite you to think about is attending to social and emotional needs allows students to be ready for learning. I think that in a traditional context, or even as people are starting to come online, if you will, around social and emotional learning, they're getting excited about it. It's important to understand that social and emotional learning is actually the foundation. If a young person is in distress, if their nervous system is dysregulated, if they are having a conflict with a peer, if they are having something going on at home, that is going to affect their readiness for learning. So when you commit to social and emotional learning, it's important to hold this understanding that the reason we need to attend to this first is this actually, there's like a return on the investment. It improves learning for young people, as well as helps them to be more secure, more confident, more young people. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think this is some way when you say that this is one of the most important um, necessities in order for learning to happen, probably link it to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where your social needs have to happen.
Yes, exactly. And an expression I was going to share, which I don't know how widely it's used, is sometimes people say Maslow's before Bloom's. So
Yeah.
Maslow's is the hierarchy of needs that talks about like having your basic needs met, food, shelter, safety, warmth, those things, followed by Bloom's, which is like your deeper levels of knowledge, your higher order thinking. Students are not ready for Bloom's and doing the higher order thinking if their Maslow's has not been addressed. So I'm excited that you mentioned that, because I I wasn't sure if that expression would be as accessible. But yes, Maslow's thing one before Bloom's thing two.
Great. Also, in India, there is very ancient, traditional, you would say, framework for how a human being is divided into sheets, layers, and this is something that
Mm,
comes from the practice of yoga. It's called the Panchakosha Vikasa.
mm,
So I think it means that a human being has different layers of development that
yes,
happen. And what you said is actually in line, in sync with what the Panchakosha Vikasa also talks about. So I think there
it's
is a lot
awesome.
of traditional wisdom that's available about this, but somewhere along the way we've lost our way. We've just forgotten about such important concepts. So I'm really happy that you're able to bring all this to the forefront.
Yay. And I'm so appreciative of that connection too. Thank you.
Great. So now that we've spoken about how we can also assess SEL, first of all, how it looks like in a classroom, how we can probably have frameworks and assessment based on SEL in the classroom. I think one of the most pressing questions that I had was about we are now, the world is divided into pre-pandemic and post-pandemic.
Yeah.
Um, have you observed anything different? Like, what are some challenges that teachers are facing in this kind of a hybrid environment where we have to sometimes be virtual, sometimes in person, and how can schools adapt to this evolving kind of a role?
Yeah. Well, the pandemic did shift many things, and revealed gaps, revealed longstanding areas of need and inequities. And there were some really innovative and creative solutions that also came out of this difficult time. It is my hope that some of the things that we learned we hold on to, and we use that to change education for the better, to shift it towards a more equitable SEL focused approach, because we definitely learned, the importance of mental health, and the importance of social connection for young people in the absence of being able to be in person in school in a sustained and ongoing way. So there are a myriad of challenges. Here's what I would advocate for educators and parents and caregivers to focus on, which is using technology to shorten the distance, and improve access to experts, information, and collaboration. Even when I was an educator, there were ways that I didn't lean into my imagination in terms of how I could connect people, because people didn't have the same readiness, or willingness or interest to like connect with young people virtually. It always, I always worried it was an imposition. And I think the world kind of flattened in that way, and it just became easier to access people, and people felt more comfortable being online and talking with young people. So it is my hope that educators and parents and caregivers continue to leverage technology to connect students with the world far beyond the walls of the classroom. The next thing is to really continue to prioritize connection and belonging. So whether we are in person, we're hybrid, or we're fully remote, it's important that we are fostering a student's sense of connection with themselves and others, and then they have a sense of belonging in the community, whatever configuration that community is, or whatever shape it takes. And then there's many things to focus on, but these are the three that I'm offering, would be including self-awareness. So it's really important for young people to have the language to start to name what is going on inside of themselves. What are they needing? What are they wanting? What are they feeling? So that they can make decisions about how to respond. And when you look, let's say you're looking at the CASTLE framework, it really does begin with self-awareness. So starting with how can I have language to even understand what's going on inside myself? And then you start to move outward, working with others. A resource that I'd love to share with you is, this was our first book, and we actually wrote this right at the height of the pandemic. This was towards the end of the summer of 2020. And this ebook, it's a free ebook that we have that offers collaboration strategies with a focus on connection for virtual and physically distanced learning environments. So we take some really commonly used successful strategies and talk about how to implement them in this way. Hopefully that makes it easier. If you're wondering, hey, Gina, what does that look like? I wanted to offer a couple of quick examples so you know what you're getting yourself into. So the book talks about 4 different categories for collaboration, one being goals in progress. So there's a simple process called check-in, check-out, where similar to what we talked about with the SEL booster, young people have an opportunity to come together to check in about, what am I working on? What are my questions? What are you working on? And then how are we going to leverage this time together? And then there's a checkout at the end. So did we meet our goals? Did we complete our tasks? What do we need to do for the next time that we meet? And then another category of protocols and activities that we offer is under collaborative thinking. What collaborative thinking refers to is the process of young people actually building knowledge in an interdependent way. It can be easy to think that cooperation is actually collaboration, but if students are not having shared goals, if they're not constructing meaning and learning together, then it's not true collaboration. So under collaborative thinking, we offer the strategy of Chalk Talk. It's a simple protocol of students using a writing space and coming up and silently adding their contributions. They can also use it, it kind of can look like a mind map at the end, where young people are starring or +1ing or drawing arrows and lines, making connections among and between ideas shared from their peers. It's a powerful strategy because 1, it makes the learning visible. 2, it's a way for our more quiet young people to engage in the learning without feeling the pressure of having to say their ideas out loud. And it also helps the verbal processors, the quick to share and answer young people, be a little bit more deliberative and thoughtful and take in the ideas and the thinking of others in the class. So those are just a couple of the strategies that I wanted to share from the book.
Brilliant. And this is sounding so good, and it's wonderful that you're able to provide this as a free resource, free downloadable resource. And I think that's brilliant and goes a long way in making sure that SEL gets practiced. And I did catch the term, physically distanced learning. And I think you got that right. The whole world was talking about social distancing, and I just did not like that term when we set out, right? We're not socially distancing, we're just physically distancing ourselves. Yeah, so I like the way that has been phrased here. So I look forward to
thank you. Yeah, that felt important to say because even if we can't physically be in a particular way together, we still need that social connection, and we were trying to shift away from that. So thank you for noticing, and I hope that that's helpful.
Yes. So we've spoken a lot about what schools can do, what educators can do for social emotional learning, but there are the other stakeholders in the child's life, and I think the Castle framework a little bit touched upon that. But what do you believe is the role of a parent, of a family in social emotional learning?
Yeah, so I'm going to head back over to the Castle framework for a moment. So again, this is a systemic framework that talks about different contexts and spaces. I want to reiterate, as you've actually already done, that families and caregivers are a part of that picture. So one of the important things is for parents to know what the framework is that your school is using. If you're not sure what that is, definitely ask. And educators, you'll want to share this with parents because we want to invite them to be part of the process. So once you as a parent have or caregiver have the opportunity to get to know the framework, understanding some of the skills and capacities that young people need to have in order to demonstrate confidence and competence in the different domains, here are the things that I invite you all to think about. So one is this idea, and with the arrow here is modeling. So um, as parents and caregivers, we are fortunate enough to be shepherds of our young people until they are ready to go out into the world and do it all on their own. Um, and they need that cognitive modeling in order to understand how to think about things, how to make sense of them, how to communicate them out to others. So once you start to get a feel for what some of the skills are, where you're able, start to model that. So if you want your child to engage with their sibling in a particular way, model that behavior for them so that way they can see it and feel it and understand what it is supposed to look like. The other thing that I mean when I say modeling is to do what is sometimes called metacognitive modeling, or a think aloud is sometimes a shorthand for it, where we speak out loud what it is we're thinking. So I'll give you an example from my home life. I am struggling to get my children to get their shoes on to get ready to go to school. And I might say something like, Mommy is feeling really frustrated right now because I am feeling pressure about time, and it is important that we get to school on time. What can we do together to help you get your shoes on so we can get to school, right? So I name that I'm having a feeling, I'm modeling for them like what it's connected to, and I might also express like how that's showing up in my body, but I'm naming the thing that I want, or I'm asking a request of how we can work together. So modeling some of that so that way they can articulate their needs and feelings when they're in a space. The next thing that I invite parents to think about is connection. So how can you prioritize, elevate, make space for connection with your littles or big kids if they're older. So what do I mean by this? So connection can look a number of different ways. It can be through play, it can be through conversation, but the idea is that you are making intentional time to connect with your child so that you can learn what lights them up, what worries them. You can start to build lines of communication and trust so that way when both in the great times but in the challenging times they see you as someone that they can come to seek guidance and support. And then the last one is curiosity. Uh, you know, young people don't, they don't know often like why they feel the way that they do or why they want the things that they want, or why they responded the way they did to things. So how can, as parents and caregivers, we remain curious to what they're feeling and experiencing, so that we can also then in turn help them understand it. And then we can go back to like the modeling and leveraging connection in order to help them in whatever that moment might be. Um, this can be really simple. This doesn't have to be a you don't have to have a master's degree in order to do this. It's, you see how your young person is struggling to name their emotions. You can model naming your emotions. You can spend time with them and playing with them and talk about the feelings that you're having as you're doing it. And then you can ask them questions about, what does it feel like to you? What do you think it might mean? How is that showing up in your body? Do you like the way that feels? So that they can start to make those connections, have the language, so that they can take care of themselves and engage with others in caring and responsible ways.
Brilliant. I think it's just three things that we've got to do with our children. It's just three, right? So let's do it. And this is really simple. And like you said, you don't need a degree in rocket science to follow this. It's just so simple that every parent, every family member can definitely do this.
Yes.
Just like the example that you gave from your family life, I think I've practiced this with my son. And it's amazing the kind of empathy that I receive when I tell him that I'm having a day which is really bad, or I've had a very tough time. And so I'm able to see that he's able to come back to me when he's having a tough day. So I'd like to believe that modeling has a very important role in the way children are growing up, and especially in social emotional learning, because sometimes I feel as parents, we don't want to show our vulnerabilities to our children. And so we hide them, and maybe then they grow up unawares as to, okay, as a grown up, I can have vulnerabilities. So this is brilliant to know that, one, personally, I've been on the right path so far, and two, knowing that there's very simple things that parents can do for ensuring that social and emotional learning happens at home as well.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you.
So I think that kind of brings us to almost the end of this entire session. I would like to request for your parting thoughts, any one thing that you want educators and parents to really focus on. So just parting thoughts.
I don't know if this is what you meant by your question, but the thing that actually came up for me was the word grace. And I think it's important for educators and for anyone who works with young people and parents and caregivers in particular to hold yourself with some gentleness. Because often we are trying to do things differently than how we were raised. There are societal expectations about how young people are supposed to move in the world or be or not. And in some ways we're disrupting those systems, and those are very big, and those can be difficult sometimes to shift. And so I invite all of educators and parents and caregivers alike to be gentle with themselves, because you're learning too. I mean, at any given moment, you have never been a parent of a child that is 6 years, 2 months, 3 days, and 18 hours old. Like at any moment, you are completely new to the thing that you are doing. And so to just hold some gentleness for yourself, and then allow that to extend to your child as they are also learning. We're often making it up at any moment. So that was the thing that came to mind. And the journey is worth it. So that, I think those would be my final thoughts.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I think gentleness and grace towards yourself and to all the relationships that you have probably will go a long way in the kind of VUCA world that we are living in. So it's brilliant. And that's a great note to end this session on. I'd really like to thank you so much for taking the time to do this for us. I know that, this is a late part of the day that you had to do the session and you had to make some adjustments at home. So I'm really, really thankful that you gave us the time. And I hope that we're able to engage further, talk about more points about SEL and how it looks like in PBL classrooms going forward as well. With that, I'd like to end this session on Tapas Project Shala's SEL with Dr. Gina Olaguanega. Gina, if our viewers have any questions, I will request them to put it up on the chat below the session when the session is aired, and we hope that you're able to respond via email, and we will make sure that it reaches our viewers. So if there are any questions, please do leave them in the comments, and we will request her to respond. And the free resources will be made available to you, all the links that Gina spoke about. The book, the downloadable ebook, also will be shared with all of you who are registered, as well as will be available on our website for download. So thank you all once again for being with us today, and we hope to see you soon again at the next session of Tapas Project Shala. Have a great day ahead.